Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Oh, thank you very much. Enthusiastic crowd on this fine Thursday morning. Welcome to your Project and Community Workshop, August 15th, 2019. I got some reminders and some announcements for you this morning. We have a public lecture tonight in the Turquoise Ballroom, which is where you're sitting, if you were unaware of that. It starts at 7 p.m. We have a great lineup of speakers. Come and learn a little bit about LSST and black holes. And then afterwards, stay and mingle. There's actually been quite a bit of press about this, both in the local newspapers and a bit on TV this morning, I've heard. So we should get a pretty good crowd. So definitely stick around, wear your badge. You can mingle and chat with the non-specialists. Practice your pitches. For those of you who are in the Engaging Your Audience session yesterday, make some friends. It'll be fun. We have an exit survey, so it is of endless value to hear from you about what went well, what didn't go well at this conference. The only way we know how to improve and what to improve is if you tell us what you thought went well or what we need to improve. So please give us that feedback. This will be sent to you in an email. You can find it on community.org. It's on the Slack meeting channel, and it's already on the website for this workshop, or if you still remember how to use these little scan things, you can do that too. But please, give us your feedback. It's really useful. Breakout slides. Did you run a session? Then add a summary slide at this URL. Otherwise, you don't have to do anything. You can just come tomorrow to the plenary and enjoy the summaries of what people went over in their breakout sessions. We've had 29 breakout sessions so far, and only 16. Actually, that's more than half, so that's pretty good. So, well done. But still, we need more. Okay, so go ahead and do that today, then you don't have to think about it anymore. And finally, I think this might be the last one, there is an algorithms workshop. For those of you who have been aware of this, the location has changed, so now it's at Slack, 3rd through 5th of December of this year. The goal is to engage the community in choice of LSST algorithms. You can see some of the discussion topics. Leanne Guy is the contact for this, so we really hope to get a lot of participation in that workshop. And so this is your play-by-play for this morning. We're going to have our next round of lightning stories, and then we'll hear about integration and commissioning. I should have said that more exciting. And then we'll hear about integration and commissioning. And then we'll have a tea break. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second. So our first lightning story of today is a visitor all the way from France. This is, here you go, here's your clicker. This is Bastien Gounod.
Thank you. So hi, my name is Bastien Gounod. I work for CCI P3 in Lyon, France, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I do for LSST. So we'll start with a little bit of background. I've been seriously into computer science since the age of 15, running my own Linux servers in my room back in 2008 or something. So at that time, I decided that it would become my job. Then I studied computer science, network engineering, and software development for 5 years. My first contact with the research environment actually also was my first working experience, as I worked for the LIRIS laboratory in France on a web application for an internship. I then went on with my studies and ended up doing another internship in the US this time, in the state of Pennsylvania, where I worked for 3 months. Since then, I spent a few years working for a private network provider and a hosting services company in France. And I was designing and deploying virtualization infrastructures for other companies. Eventually, in December 2018, I decided to leave my job in the industry and join CCI P3 and the LSST project. So my subjects of interest are space, science, infrastructure management, computing infrastructure management with concepts such as container orchestration, and open source software. Less serious subjects also include electronic music, video games, cars, beer, and cats. So please enjoy the free silly picture of my cat. Now, for this session, we were asked to summarize our work in a single sentence. So after a little bit of thinking, I've come to the conclusion that, well, most of the time, what I'm doing is tinkering around with obscure pieces of software, moving data back and forth, and writing broken code. So here's a kind of related XKCD comic, because obviously there's one for every situation. Now, before talking more about what I personally do for LSST, I wanted to talk a little bit about CC INTP3, the public research unit and data center where I work. CC INTP3 is INTP3's computing center, and what we do here is operating computing, storage, and network services for science. This includes mass storage systems, batch computing systems, hosting services, and software developments. Our users are generally researchers working in the fields of particle physics, nuclear physics, or astrophysics, with experiments such as the LHC, Virgo, Bell 2, Euclid, or LSST, for example. Our role in the LSST project is to provide resources to process 50% of the data for annual data releases, while the other 50% are processed by NCSA. We will also be one of the few sites storing a full copy of the LSST data. Now, if we're going to talk a little bit more about my own work for LSST, here's how we can summarize it. I try to explore new technologies and new software and understand how they can help us. I'm also deploying and maintaining the services on our infrastructure. Sometimes I will have to build new tools, custom tools, to make data management tasks easier or automate them. And I also bring support to our users with their data management needs. So, in a word, we are getting our infrastructure ready for telescope operations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have someone joining us from the camera team. As the camera team's winding down, there aren't too many people joining us this week. But luckily and thankfully, we have Regina Matter.
Hi, I'm Regina Matter, Camera Administrator at SLAC. When I was first asked to do this lightning talk, honestly, I thought, why me? I don't have any technical background, but then I thought, why not me? Did I do something wrong? I did the clicker.
That's all right.
Sorry.
Just this one.
That
you
one.
might have hit stop.
My bad.
No, that's all right. Got it.
All right. There. Cool. So I have 25 years of administration experience at SLAC. I grew up in the Bay Area and started with the PEP2 project at SLAC before I joined LSST about 5 years ago. I have a great family, a proud parent of 2 great kids. My daughter started her career in political and nonprofit communications. My son is starting college and majoring in computer science and doing what he loves is playing baseball in college. My personal motto is believe. Believe in yourself, believe anything is possible. And I try to instill this with my kids. We often, during the holidays, wear our bells to remind us to believe. From the movie Polar Express, remember when if you can hear the bell ring, you can still believe. Well, to this day, I always keep this bell near me as a constant reminder to always believe and never stop believing. What do I do for LSST? I support the fabulous camera team. The thing I really like most about my job is truly helping people. Some of the things involved meeting coordination and logistics. It's often a lot of coordination behind the scenes. For example, last week, the LSST Directors Review was at Slack. There was quite a few things involved to coordinate it. Reserving conference rooms, arranging catering, reception, dinner, computer meeting support, room setup, admins on-site support, and meeting announcements. Some of the things with the catering, you really try to make it special for everybody and make sure their dietary special needs are met. And also our reception and dinner was outside, so we had an issue about bees and wasps. So we had to get it together and get these lemons stuffed with cloves out and citrus candles, and even somebody suggested to put a piece of meat off to the side to try to deter them, so hopefully it helped. I also help with travel with visitors who come to Slack with their invite letters, lodging, site access, and their travel expense reports. I help with resources, onboarding, computer accounts, getting them offices, ordering computers, access to distribution lists. I'm your all-around kind of point of contact person for the camera team. I wanted to share this slide that I actually borrowed from Margot Lopez that is still mind-boggling to me. It's about the camera sensitivity and more relatable units. If a candle were lit in Palo Alto, it would be observable 10,400 kilometers away in Patagonia, Chile. I mean, wow. For a non-technical person, I really connected with the slide. It is still just truly amazing. The best thing about my job is being part of a team of believers. And working together, we can overcome any challenges. LSST will greatly impact advances in science and provide endless opportunities in education and data access to help the community and the world. This is why I'm still so excited to be part of this special team, helping people explore the universe and be part of the discovery process. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Our next speaker has a couple videos, so again, as in yesterday, if you didn't mind turning off your Wi-Fi to reserve that power. I will, without further ado, bring the next contestant for Lightning Stories. Look to the back of the room, Emily!
Okay, so I'm Emily Acosta. I'm the Senior Graphics and Web Developer for LSST. I tried to get out of doing this talk so many times. So who am I? I was a waitress at Waffle House for 9 years before I came to LSST. I'm trying. Okay, so I saved all of my change in boxes in my closet like a pirate, and managed to save enough for a down payment for a townhouse. I have an awesome family, 3 kids. So there's Joey, he's 17, Caitlin, 15, and Kai, he's 5. I have 2 cats, Loki and Thor, and a princess dog. Her name's Wendy. So what do I do for LSST? This meeting is a really good example of what I do. Sorry. So I made this website. I do the agenda. I do the registration. I made this PowerPoint slide template. I record the meeting, and I do all the signage and the digital signage and your name badges and drink tickets. So I do the t-shirts. So what I find most exciting about my job is that I get to carry camera gear. which means that I get to go to places that most people can't. It's very adventurous. This is the server room at the base facility. This is us chasing the mirror, or it chasing us. Going through the tunnel and getting safely to the summit. And then, so this is the coding chamber and the great team that put it together. And that's the inside. So they covered up the window with a sweater and like let me climb up there and take this picture. It was fun. Oh, so they put me in fall protection gear and gave me a helmet. I strapped a GoPro to my head and got to climb to the very top of the dome under construction. I don't think anybody else is going to get to do that, you know? And it was pretty fun. And so, yeah, my favorite time is when I'm in a hard hat. Thank you.
Okay, not as exciting going down the stage. We're all winded. Thank you very much, Emily. That was excellent. You can see most of these photos and videos on gallery.lsst.org. Little plug for that. And next up, we have from Chile, Juan Fábrega Cortez.
Bien, y bueno, mi presentación es en español. ¿Se escucha bien? Sí, me escucha. Mi nombre es Juan Fábrega, soy ingeniero eléctrico del sitio, trabajo principalmente en la montaña. ¿Ya? Soy ingeniero eléctrico y también estudiante de ingeniería civil industrial. Y mis principales gustos son, bueno, la música, deporte y el aire libre, pero me voy a tener un poquito aquí porque no iba a sacar una foto escuchando música fondo. Y tampoco haciendo mucho deporte porque levantando peso también es fea la foto, ¿cierto? Esa es la mejor. Soy padre de una hermosa hija, ella se llama Laura y está por cumplir 1 año de vida el próximo mes. Verán que la familia le hace un gran evento cumpliendo 1 año, siendo que ella no tiene idea de que va a cumplir 1 año. Pero ahora sí. Soy parte del equipo de LSST en Telescopio Site, en la montaña, y mi principal rol es mantener el edificio con vida eléctricamente. Esto incluye desde la mantención de la línea de alta tensión hasta los subsistemas que están adentro del edificio. Requerimientos de distintos subsistemas también. Mi principal dedicación hoy es integrar mi especialidad eléctrica también a la ingeniería civil y darle también otra connotación también al edificio. Mi experiencia nunca fue telescopio, nunca me vi tampoco trabajando en un telescopio, siempre en minería y en líneas de alta tensión. Nunca me vi tampoco trabajando ahí donde estoy ahora. Línea de alta tensión y la cápsula de los mineros rescatados. Líneas de alta tensión también. Ese es mi principal trabajo, o sea, mi principal experiencia. No cambia, quiere decir que no cambia en el lugar donde yo esté, nunca va a cambiar. La electricidad siempre va a ser la misma. Yo llegué el año 2017 al sitio verificando en realidad que todas las leyes se cumplan de acuerdo a la construcción. La misión mía era regular las especificaciones técnicas prácticamente. Durante el 2018 el edificio se entregó para ser implementado e integrado con distintos subsistemas. Desde ahí, el departamento eléctrico empezó a cambiar. Empezamos a tener responsabilidades y a integrar distintos subsistemas. Y eso es lo entretenido y lo dinámico de este trabajo. Interactuamos con distintos subsistemas siendo locales, nosotros somos locales. Actualmente, el departamento eléctrico está conformado por 2 técnicos y mi principal misión es verificar cualquier requerimiento que hay de distintos subsistemas e integrarlos para poder tener un tiempo determinado y poder realizar el trabajo. Personalmente, mi misión, mi perspectiva a futuro es, como todo eléctrico, es que las cosas funcionen. Y para que eso funcione, hay que estar ahí, ¿cierto? Mi misión es que el telescopio tenga la primera luz, desde el proceso de inicio hasta el final. Gracias.
And thank you for your attention. I just want to give one more round of applause for our lightning stories for this year at the Project and Community Workshop. Thank you all. And next up, integration and commissioning. I will get rid of the microphone.
All right, are we on?
You're on.
Am I on? All right. One more announcement before we get started. In case you didn't notice, we're actually in a desert. Take care today. It's supposed to be 110. Stay hydrated. Watch the sun. Put sunblock on, etc. Anyway, the presentation we're about to give is a mix between myself and Sandrine. Sandrine, how would you stand up? Just turn around. Everyone knows Sandrine. And we're going to, this talk is going to try to encapsulate sort of the changes that we've experienced on the project as how we look at system integration, test, and commissioning. It's meant to be some background. We have a series of breakouts today. Hopefully, I've been approached numerous times throughout the meeting with multiple questions. I have kind of tried to defer questions. Move it up. Okay. I don't have a quiet voice. We will try to summarize kind of what the mission of this effort is, and then talk about the things that we're doing now, and then Sandrine will talk about what our plans are moving forward, how those have changed, and then hopefully that'll answer some questions, and then we can follow up in the breakouts with some of the more details of discussion. So, without further ado, what's the mission? Mission is to answer 3 fundamental questions. Did we build what we said we were going to do? That's verification. Does what we have built do what we want it to do? That's validation. And do we understand how and why what we have built works the way it does? And that's characterization. This latter point is important because the science of LSST is systematics, right? And the characterization of our system is the root of understanding what the systematics are. And that may be a place where the community beyond the project can lend and assist, and we should have that discussion in our breakouts and as the day goes on. So in the past, you've heard me stand up here and tell you about the sequencing of events where we have a telescope and site assembly integration and verification effort that then leads into system integration, test, and commissioning. These were separate efforts planned and scheduled essentially serially. Things have changed, as Victor alluded to. in his plenary to open up this meeting, and it's forced us to accept the fact that telescope and site AIV, the physical integration of the telescope and hardware on the summit, and the system integration is just one overlapping effort, and we call that system integration. What changed? What changed, as Victor alluded to at the beginning, is that critical path dates, particularly with the dome and the TMA, have moved in the wrong direction. We've learned things as we've developed systems here in Tucson, as we receive systems from our vendors. We've learned that some of these systems are a bit more complex than we originally anticipated, so the activity scope needed to integrate them has been updated. And then in an attempt to bring the schedule in alignment with what we have allocated, we've tried to better integrate the AIV commissioning efforts and brought some commissioning activities that were scheduled for late in the project. We've pulled them forward and tried to get them done earlier, and that also has consequences. So additional inputs to this, the updates that you've been hearing about are driven, as far as schedule goes, by the TMA and dome effort. So the TMA shipment left Spain, so I should make that into a past tense now. That was late July. It's on its way. It's due to arrive in Chile early September. We're still targeting to get a dome readiness for the start of the integration of the TMA mid-September, and the TMA reassembly and installation start in early October. And then this leads to a targeted completion of the telescope mount assembly by the end of September, a year later in 2020. And that's a critical date for us. That's when the hardware infrastructure on the up at the observatory is ready for us to start integrating all of our prime hardware, mirrors, hexapod rotators, ComCam, LSST cam eventually, etc. So that's a key date for us. Victor showed you this chart in his plenary. This is one you've seen before. The main difference here, right, is that, do we have a laser pointer? We do have a laser pointer. Awesome. That this little circle right here, it used to say 8.5 months, is now 3.5 months. And that's the fact of life. So for the rest of the talk, we're going to concentrate on the details of what's happening in this part of the schedule where we are now, particularly with what's happening in the purple lines here, and how we've had to adjust things accordingly to deal with these schedule changes. So Victor showed you this chart as well. The takeaway, you'll see this chart multiple times. The takeaway here right now is, if you look at this chart, in any vertical direction, there's multiple things happening all at the same time. Everything's become parallel in order to keep us on track. So we have things related to a lot of activity dealing with the integration and test of M1 and M3. We have Pathfinder activities for the camera refrigeration system. We have early integration of ComCam. We'll talk more about that later. The Oxtel is coming online. And then following that massively parallel activity leads to the end game here, which is something you've heard me talk about multiple times before, where we start with ComCam here, we integrate the LSST cam, and then we do our final science validation surveys at the end. So that's sort of the cartoon block of what the structure of system integration test commissioning looks like now. The big change here is it's compressed. Right? It was strung out before, kind of a serial effort. It's now squeezed. some of you probably have seen this chart before. This is another way to look at the time sequencing of the events in commissioning, where you have time going in both directions here, both horizontally and vertically, and they're just at different levels of granularity. So for both, this vertical column here is the time sequencing for ComCam, that then follows the time sequencing for LSST cam, which then follows the science validation. So both ComCam and LSST cam share an initial phase of technical integration. This is where we're physically putting the hardware on the system, integrating its command control software, the data exchange, the data transport, etc. We had planned to then follow that technical integration phase with some sustained observing, is what I call it, sustained observing programs that were designed to push data through the science pipelines and get the data management team and the science validation team working on the verification validation of the science algorithms using real LSST data. And that also follows suit with the LSST cam. And then these green boxes represents the final end game, where basically you can think of these as dress rehearsals for operation. We have two mini surveys. The first one is split into two components that are designed specifically to test the alert production processing. So we first take data to create templates. While those templates are being processed, we do mini survey number 2, which is designed to test the data release processing. And then at the end, we take those templates and we do alert processing validation. Unfortunately, because of the schedule compression that we've experienced, in order to recover schedule, we've had to scale back the planned observing with ComCam. So this 3 months of time is now, it's sort of waiting in the wings, but it's officially off the books. I will have more to say, but I think what we will find out that because we're moving integration of ComCam earlier in time, that this technical integration part will proceed more quickly than we currently have scheduled, and we will still get significant amount of observing data out of ComCam for the early science pipeline testing. So looking at this in another way, that in words, that the whole plan is actually structured in several phases. We're in this phase here right now, what I call phase 0. That's happening today. I'll have much more to say about this, but we're basically designing the tests, specifying the verification requirements, converting those test and verification requirements into executable code, testing the executable code on existing data and simulation data, and getting ready for real data coming out of the system as it comes together. We're doing some early integration activities. I'll have some words to say about that coming up later. And then once all this early preparatory work is mature and the system is ready to integrate with the TMA ready to go, then we have these 3 different phases, including with ComCam, the full LSST cam, and then final science validation. So a few words about what we're doing now. We're setting up systems for environmental monitoring. These include things like an IR camera to continually do a thermal audit as the systems come together so we can monitor the thermal footprint inside the dome. We have small instruments that we're developing to actually monitor the turbulence in the dome. Brian Stalder, who's been walking around throughout the conference, he's been working hard on getting our 2 DIMMs, the differential image motion monitors, set up and so we can reestablish our seeing measurements at the site. We haven't had seeing measurements on site for more than a decade, and we're within a couple of months of actually turning those systems on. So in this picture here, we have one that will end up on top of our DIM tower as a permanent DIM. Then we have a second that is a portable DIM that allows us to move it around either outside the facility or even inside the facility to monitor the properties of the turbulent conditions in and out of the facility. The DOE-led commissioning team has been actively preparing for the arrival of the LSST cam on the summit. Here you have a little montage of the clean room and white room. They're both clean rooms, just different levels, that will be used to reassemble the camera, the LSST camera, once it arrives in Chile. These are now fully functional. They're have met their cleanliness spec. They have been provisioned, and clean room protocols are now in place for entry and exit. And we look forward to using these facilities coming down the road to, first, I think ComCam will show up and use this space, and then LSST cam will use this space. The refrigeration pathfinder, this is an effort to do early testing of the camera refrigeration system in Chile to prepare for the camera arriving. And so this is an ongoing effort. Kevin Reel and Margot Lopez, Diane Haskell, and others from SLAC have been leading this effort. They do this in a series of sprints. And the most recent sprint, they were able to lay the refrigeration pathfinder plumbing, set up some of the vacuum pumps that are necessary for cleaning out and purging the vacuum lines, setting up the valve manifold that will be used not just for the pathfinder, but it will also be used for integrating the camera when the LSST cam arrives in Chile and undergo its re-verification. The pathfinder has its own heat exchanger system that's about complete in fabrication in SLAC and about ready to be delivered to Chile. So in the next several months, we will be receiving the compressor cabinets, and we'll be starting the system up in earnest before the end of the year. The Oxtel, heard a little bit about that. The hardware integration has gone along fairly well. We've got all the optics installed. The telescope team, Patrick and Tiago, are busily working out the command and control aspects of moving this telescope. You may have seen a video of this telescope doing coordinated motion with the dome. That's working. This past July, just a month ago, or less than a month ago, we got first light through the system. And here in Tucson, we have set up a summit-like network for testing the instrumentation. That's ongoing. And we spent some time at this conference here in various breakouts talking about what exactly we need to do with the Oxtel instrument here in Tucson as a system integration effort before we send it down to Chile and get it ready to go on the telescope. So that's underway as well. And that's primarily a software integration effort more than a hardware effort. ComCam is playing an important role as a pathfinder and a leading effort in the pre-integration activities, if you will, prior to the LSST cam showing up. Very quickly, ComCam is a one-raft camera, uses the same science sensor as the LSST cam, has a 3-element corrector, very similar in design to the main camera's correctors, just smaller. We have 6 filters for the LSST cam, although we only use 3 at a time. One thing that happened over the past year is we planned to have the raft inside ComCam was supposed to be one of the engineering rafts that the camera team has developed. And we had an opportunity with some commissioning funding to fabricate a dedicated raft for ComCam. And so now we call that the Com raft. And It was meant to be a risk mitigation effort, both in terms of schedule and technical performance. And you can see a bias image of ComRaft here, and it's a pretty nice raft. It's got all 144 amplifiers working. The read noise properties of this raft are just only slightly above the scientific spec for the LSST cam, but it's pretty cool. I'm very excited to have that in ComCam. This lower picture here shows the utility quad box for ComCam. And the reason why I want to show that is I want to make the point that ComCam uses all the same componentry as the main camera, just fewer of them. But so that means that ComCam will test all the interfaces directly that the LSST cam will use. So that will give us a leg up on getting LSST cam integrated into the hardware. We have all 6 filters for ComCam in hand. This is an actual response curve of the I-band filter, showing that it essentially met spec. This is a result of some of the, we piggybacked on top of the LSST cam's filter contract, where the vendor was doing witness sample demonstrations of the filter recipes. The ComCam cryostat was developed at SLAC. That has been completed. We had a pre-ship review in May. It shipped. The little time series chart up there shows, can't read the axes, but that's basically the accelerometer record of its transport from SLAC to Tucson. And the takeaway from that is that it had a nice, safe ride. And visual inspection of the raft inside the dewar after shipment. Here it is set up, the initial setup in the lab, doing test fits for the interface to the corrector. All that has been completed. This is what, then after that initial checkout in the lab, we brought it into the machine shop, did some alignment for the corrector cell. That's complete, and now ComCam is in the lab right now, looking more or less like that and fully functional at this point. So we're actually able to read out ComCam, produce pixels, run the CCS, run the DAC in a place other than in SLAC using a real instrument. So I think that's a good milestone for us. And this is just an example of what some of this work that Brian has been doing, just making it work. So now the next steps for ComCam is to do the system level interfacing with the other system elements, including the command control from the OCS components, data transport with the DM components, and then transferring the data to NCSA and evaluating that data through the science platform. So that's just a real quick tour through some of the early integration stuff that we're doing. And this, the point here is to underscore the message that Victor had in his plenary, is that system integration, test, commissioning is not something that's happening down the road and in the future. It's happening now. There's real stuff happening now, and it's only going to accelerate from here on out. And without any further ado, I'll hand it over to Sandrine.
The other one.
And she'll tell you a bit about what the plan going forward looks like.
Thank you, Chuck. So first I want to do a test because I don't have a strong voice, so can you hear me? Okay, good. So Chuck went through, but they heard me. So Chuck went through some of the activities that actually already happened, are on the way, either in Tucson or on the summit. And what I'm going to take on right now is more what's happening right now and what's going to happen in the next year, year and a half. So that's on that chart. I'm not going to point that down. So here are the dates, a little bit more of the dates that Chuck already mentioned. I'm not going to go through all of them and let you read them, but one thing to emphasize again is that a lot of things are happening in parallel, especially in the fall right now. So what we need to really focus on is carefully look at the logistics and the resources that we need, and both on the summit and also in Tucson, or potentially in a community if there are some interest. And the goal for the next year is to have a TMA, a mount assembly, ready in October 2020, September 30th, but then start doing installation of the mirrors in October 2020. So what I'm going to do right now is go through the lines, a few of the lines, and then explain a little bit what's going on. So I'd start with what's happening right now at the summit, which is the M1, M3 integration sequence. Some of the people in Chile couldn't travel to this conference because they're very, very busy putting our system together. And those pictures that you see on the chart right now actually were taken this week. I detailed the integration steps. We have the assembly of the cart, assembly of the surrogate mirror, which you can see both on the top and on the bottom right here. And then integrating that mirror surrogate on the cell and start putting the actuators together. But this is pretty impressive. That's a very big milestone that was achieved this week. And so what went into this milestone was really understanding the people. So we knew that we had to leave some people behind, fortunately, for this conference, and also the logistic. So we have this graph right here represents what we call the maintenance floor. We have different floor on the observatory, and this is the last floor before you go take the lift and go into the dome. And that floor is huge, but when you put an 8.4 meter mirror surrogate plus a 10 meter cell, plus a coating chamber, plus what you don't see right here, but you see in the picture, an M2 cell, plus a cleaning room, it's starting to get pretty cramped. So because of what Chuck mentioned, we have to integrate the commissioning activities with the AIV activities, and the AIV activities itself has to have a lot of things in parallel. We have to really have a good understanding of what's happening in the clean room. In a maintenance floor. So that's the takeaway of that slide. And then the other thing that's going to start in parallel with that in a month, as I mentioned, is the TMA installation. So the TMA, if you recall the presentation from Victor, the TMA is right now in a boat going towards Chile. It was shipped on July 29th. So the big pieces are getting to the site very, very soon. So we have to also understand a lot of the logistics and work with the team to see what we can do in parallel. Again, we mentioned that a few times, but the TMA and the dome are a little late. We have a lot of things happening, so we really need to work with them to understand what we can do to accelerate the process. And one very interesting step is to integrate the M2 hexapod, which is not a deliverable from the TMA vendor, to the TMA itself and put that top-end assembly. So the top-end assembly is this piece right here, where you have the spiders, we have the electronics. So all that will go on the telescope, and we will put the M2 hexapod with it to accelerate the process. Another activity that will happen, and is really showing the coupling between commissioning and AIV, is installing the cable wrap that allows the whole camera to rotate with the camera hexapod rotator and eventually ComCam. So I'm going to go through that in more detail in a second. And then in November 2020, we will have gone through 5 months of system verification. And those 5 months of verification are really exciting because that's when we're going to have the first demonstration of the pointing of the telescope. And we will, I'll show you in a bit what we'll be using for that. And we'll really look at the performance of the system, which is slew saddles and tracking. So then you'll start actually really getting into the performance of the telescope and the science that we'll be able to do with that telescope. So that's only happening in less than a year from now. All right, so I mentioned one of the parallel activity that we are looking at is integrating the cable wrap and the hexapod and eventually ComCam in the card before we put it on the telescope. And I want to point out that that early integration is going to save us, is being moved by about a year. So in the previous planning, we were supposed to do the TMA and then integrate the ComCam on the card. So now we're actually really moving that forward. And again, resources and logistics, but it's really, really saving some time. This is what we're talking about. So I'm going to point the cart. This is a camera cart. It looks kind of small, but it's really big. To think about the camera, it's 1.5 meter, 6 meter high. So this is a huge thing. Then we have at the back here the camera cable wrap. We have the what we call the integrating structure that will go on the top-end assembly that I mentioned earlier. We'll have the hexapod and any instruments, either ComCam, the LSST camera, or a integration and test instrument. And inside, what I didn't mention is that we will also have the refrigeration pathfinder. So we will be able to do also some testing, early testing of that. So there's a lot of activity in parallel that will happen and a lot of exciting potential little work package that we could actually have people help us with. So the goal of this activity is to do an operation dress rehearsal from scripting observing, meaning that we are using the scheduler, which is the brain of the telescope telling you where to go at every single pointing, to the data transfer to MCSA, and then data analysis with the LSST platform. So that, without even using the sky and doing that in a lab, we will be able to have a completely full data transfer all the way. And that's somewhat repeating what I already said a little bit. Again, I want to emphasize that we will do a lot of software integration as well. So using the scheduler and then sending the pointing messages to the cable wrap and the hexapod, and then all the way to getting the images. The other activity that will happen really soon is the M2, so the secondary mirror. And for that, we will do extensive testing also in a maintenance floor. So this is a picture of the M2 cell plus surrogate onto its cart. As you see, the cart can move to simulate gravity. And we will do a lot of gravity measurement with the surrogate and with the glass mirror to prepare to put the glass mirror straight on the TMA. All right, so once we've done with that, we have all of the subcomponents being tested, and we can start assembling everything onto the actual mount and do on-sky testing. But before doing really the on-sky testing, we'd have to test the M1, M3 mirror, the M2 on the actual TMA and look at their performance there. But then after that, we're ready. And the first thing we'll do is to put a star tracker on the side of the TMA and do some pointing tests that I mentioned earlier. So we'll check the relative accuracy of the pointing at this point with our mirror. So it's going to be mostly mechanical, repeatability and tracking drift. We actually have right now that star tracker in the lab in Tucson, and we're doing some integration and test on it. And then the next step is to put a initial optical testing assembly, IOTA, which is a Shakarma reference sensor that you can see right here, and a CMOS camera, a high-speed camera. And the goal for these two instruments that will be put at the focus of the telescope will be to do mostly pointing verification with the 3-mirror system, so we will actually look at the optical feedback this time, and also to do image quality diagnostic. A third application is to do active optic lookup table verification. So we'll go at different orientation and then compare the error that we get, the wavefront error that we get relative to the lookup table that we got from earlier measurements in the labs. And then the fourth application is to do vibration characterization using the CMOS camera, and the CMOS camera is actually a high-speed camera that goes to better than 200 hertz. So that's when we're really starting to look at what's happening in, with the telescope performance. And that's happening around spring 2021. I didn't put that in there. And that's it for my part.
Thank you, Sandrine.
Right.
Thank you. Okay, we'll round out the talk with the end game of what we have been calling commissioning. As I mentioned earlier, you've seen this chart. We start off with ComCam, then transition into LSST cam, and then do some science verification validation at the end. You just saw this picture from Sandrine. This is ComCam. One of the important functions of ComCam, in addition to being this early optical test science camera, mini science camera thing, is this refrigeration pathfinder. That's a critical element of ComCam to do. Basically what that does is that we hook up the pathfinder to the plumbing on the telescope mount, and that'll be the first time we run refrigerant through that plumbing. So that plumbing has to be cleaned out, evacuated, purged with dry nitrogen, charged with refrigerant, and then run and allowed to come into equilibrium. There we go. And this is the sequence of events that happens. Your Gantt chart, but so we have a heat exchanger that is embedded in the ComCam assembly. That's coming to fruition at SLAC. So one of the things that is important to think about when you think about this refrigeration pathfinder is, by my estimate, about 75% of the work that we have to do with the pathfinder is work we have to do no matter what, right? So, because I've been asked several times at the conference this week, is the question I get is, essentially, what is my estimate of the probability of ComCam actually going on the telescope and actually getting starlight on it? And right now, my confidence level is pretty high because, if for no other reason, we still have to do this function, whether it's with ComCam or LSST cams. Right now, with the compressed schedule, ComCam has 3 months of planned time on the telescope right now. If we said, well, if things got even tighter than they are now, and we said, well, let's eliminate ComCam, how much time do we save? The answer is, we don't save that much time because of this work that has to be done. So within the current plan, then as ComCam goes on the telescope, there's time allocated for the actual physical and electrical integration and connection and setting it up. There's testing of the command control interface and getting the pointing model refinement and doing some on-sky functional tests. Of course, as soon as we're at this phase, we're also doing calibration measurements using the in-dome calibration hardware and starting to truly characterize the LSST sensors in their operating environment. And that's important because I think many of us who have built instruments for astronomy before know that our instruments perform one way in the laboratory and they perform another way when they're on the telescope. And then the primary mission of again, verify that instrument signature calibration, and begin the on-sky active optics verification. So somewhere out there, I hope in the audience is Bo Jin. Bo Jin has done quite a bit of analysis and simulation work to show that we can do an awful lot about characterizing the active optics system of LSST with just ComCam. And we had a breakout session yesterday on wavefront estimation led by David Thomas. That was very illuminating for me, and it's gotten my ideas going about how we would actually do that with ComCam and the different methods that team members have been developing. We have at least 3 independent methods for estimating the wavefront now, which I think is really fantastic. And we can try all 3 methods out with ComCam and validate their effectiveness before we have to do this with the LSST cam. Full system integration and test follows ComCam. This is just a list of all the things that have to happen that are part of that effort. So for those of you that may not know, the LSST cam effort is kind of divided up into 2 pieces. There's the DOE MIE piece, which is the fabrication of LSST cam. That concludes with a working camera at SLAC. And then the second piece is what we call the DOE commissioning piece, and that then picks up the ball with the camera at SLAC, gets the shipping taken care of, integrating it, re-verifying it, starting up the refrigeration system, all the various testing that has to go on, and then operating the camera in Chile throughout the final stages of the project. The camera team has been busy developing and detailing the plans for shipping. There are some plans in place now to do some test runs with some of the surrogate masses so we can understand the kind of loads and vibrations that the camera will experience. I'm told I got 5 minutes, so I'll speed up. This is an example of what the integration stand that the camera has developed. It actually exists at SLAC. This is the drawing, or the CAD model is configuration for how it might look when we're doing the re-verification in Chile. This thing is a beast. It's huge. You get an idea that there's that person standing there, and there's some logistical constraints that are challenging us right now in terms of all these parallel activities happening in the level 3 maintenance area. Again, same kind of sequence: physical integration, installation on the TMA, getting the utilities connected. There's a period of time where we pump the camera down, start up the refrigeration system, get it cooled down, and then we go through essentially the same round of testing that we did with, are planning to do with ComCam, but now we're doing it at full scale with the LSST cam. Lastly, at the very end of this, I won't say at the very end, but throughout this, as we produce data, whether it's ComCam data or LSST cam data, we're feeding that data to through the science pipelines. And the data management team, as part of their continuous development and integration effort and test, are running their algorithms on existing data or simulated data. And then as soon as we get real data, we hand that off to them, and they start pushing that data through their science pipeline to start essentially re-verifying the science pipelines as we go. Now, so that's sort of a high-level pass-through of what we're doing now, what we have planned in the near term, and what we have planned in the long term. The other thing I wanted to mention is, there's a lot of chatter right now, and I've seen it show up in various charts about science collaborations wanting to use commissioning data for this or that, or I get questions about, well, what can I do to help commissioning? And I think that'll be an ongoing conversation throughout the day, but I just want to have a few words as I conclude. So the main commissioning team is the project team. I mean, we have a job to do. We signed up to do a job to commission and verify the system as we specified it. But we have this vision, and the details were still, frankly, just to be fully honest with you all, that we're still working out the details for exactly how this would work. But we're envisioning that there would be an extended commissioning team that would involve people outside the project from our community. And what we're going to need from you is, and what I think in the next, I don't know, we keep saying this, but we're going to make a concerted effort to make this a reality. Find some mechanism for you to be able to inform us, you know, things about what is your availability to travel to Chile, how long can you travel for, what expertise do you possess, and what we intend to do in the next several months is start coming up with concrete work packages of defined work. Right? It's not this do whatever you want to do. If you want to be part of this extended commissioning team, we need you, we are asking you to do defined work for us. And we're going to start defining what those packages are, and we'll find a mechanism to communicate those and publish those. And people, you can propose to do that. So, caveats. We can't pay you. The project can't pay you to do this. But we're asking you to do real work, and at the level of committing to doing that work through some formal agreement like an MOU. Ideally, you would be expected to spend some time during the commissioning period at one of the primary LSST sites. But what's in it for you? What's the carrot? Open access to everything we learned during commissioning. Got it. I got 30 seconds. And a deep understanding of the LSST data before the survey starts. So there was a breakout with Bob Marshall, or Phil Marshall and Bob Blum. I'm just trying to be efficient. About the role of early operations and making the data available. So if you're just simply curious about learning about LSST data for whatever purposes, you're free to do that. You'll do that when the data become public. But if you want to help us out doing real work, we bring you into the team, and then you get immediate access and help us out directly as we go forward. So with that, I will stop. There are several breakouts today where some of this discussion can continue, but I think we now have slightly less than 15 minutes for discussion and questions. 20. So, microphones are on the periphery, and Michael Strauss is the first to the microphone.
So with everything going parallel now, that must put real strain on people who would be doing things serious and have to be principal doing the same thing in parallel. Can you say a little bit about that?
So I don't think your microphone was turned on.
Okay.
So Michael's question, if you weren't able to hear it, is with everything going in parallel now, that must be putting strain on people, resources, and that were previously planned in a serial fashion. And yes, how does that work out? Part of this is we do the best we can, obviously, and it is true. It is putting a strain on the system and the resources. We have a work planning process now where we continuously evaluate the priorities of things and what resources are available. And honestly, so the commissioning team on my side, in the past had been largely occupied with planning exercises. Now I'm starting to direct some of those people and resources to actually integrating with the telescope integration team, actually helping them out. So we're getting more materially engaged in supporting that. So that's a little bit of extra resources in a time frame where previously we said, well, those resources only get applied later on. So we're saying, okay, we're going to move some of those applications earlier and help out. It's a challenge. I mean, this is something that I work with Steve and Victor on a daily basis on how to manage our resources.
And I would add one thing. Oh, do I stand
Go
up?
ahead.
Is it on? Yeah. The other thing that we've been doing for M1M3, for example, we had 2 people that worked previously with us, but they were subcontractors. So one from CADE and one from the NOIRLab, and we did hire them back for a shorter period of time to help us doing the integration of M1M3 in Chile. So that also is something that we are looking at doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. So another resource we have available to us is hired help, basically. So for some technical effort, we can hire outside help to free up some of our own our more specialized resources to do the more specialty things going forward. Any other questions, discussion, comments? Quiet. It's a quiet crowd this year. Surely you have questions.
Okay, I'll try to warm them up then. At which of the project sites during commissioning will Jeff be organizing soccer games?
That's a question for Jeff.
No, it's a question for the safety officer.
Sorry, which Kevin?
It's Kevin. Hey, Kevin.
Great, what was the question?
The question at which of the primary LSST sites is Jeff going to be organizing the soccer matches? For commissioning, the commissioning soccer team.
I think playing on the summit might be fun, but we'll have to check with the safety team.
It has to be Chile.
Yeah, if you do it on the summit, you better get some aerobics in now. Everybody's quiet.
Okay, so I'm very glad to see that you are extending the commissioning team to handle all the tasks, with also a laundry list and things that people will have a clear way to see how to contribute for that. Well, as there are a lot of international contributors who are thinking how they can.
Microphone just died.
Okay, so let's try it without the mic. So, would this be a way to value in-kind contributions
for international partners? I know that probably you are not the one for this political aspect, but if it's clearly helpful for the project, I guess a lot of people should be willingly to contribute to that.
So the question, and then I'll repeat the question as best I can, and then I'm going to look for either Steve or Bob Blum to respond. So with the new data rights policy that we have, right, there's this call for in-kind contributions. And the question was whether or not the international contributors could participate in this extended commissioning team as a way of in-kind contribution. I hope I got that right, roughly.
That was the question. And the answer is mostly probably not if you're thinking about just going to help in the activity of commissioning. And the reason is, you know, there's people throughout the project that already have data rights that are in the US and Chile, whatever, who are going to do the same thing. So what we would be looking for in the in-kinds is added value, things that are not already kind of in the plan, as it were. So it's probably not going to be just directly participating in commissioning would be an in-kind contribution. That's not to say that there aren't maybe some things like some tools that could be developed or that would be useful during commissioning. That's the kind of thing that we're thinking about right now, and we will give more guidance on what those possibilities are when we put out our solicitation that we've been talking about in the next month or so. So stay tuned.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah. Steve.
Yeah, Bob answered that question, but I think that, Chuck, in all good faith, you undersold the carrot, okay? So I just want to say, I want to make a pitch to this. And I want to say this particularly for the younger people on this project. This is $1 billion project. $1 billion projects come around once every 20, 30 years. There will be a 1 to 2 year period when we are figuring out everything about how this project works to get ready for science. That's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You shouldn't miss it, okay? If you're interested in astrophysical experiments, thinking about the future, if your career is maybe you want to be a key person building the next big thing, you want to be on that summit in 2021. You should talk to your advisors about it if you're a graduate student, or your mentors about it as a postdoc. But this is really a fantastic opportunity. And I think all of us who will be involved are excited about that. Some of us have experience in previous projects before, but it's very rare that you get to be one of a relatively small number of people that are going to figure out how to run and operate and understand $1 billion scientific experiment. So I really want to make that pitch. If you're just considering this, really take it very seriously and don't pass up this opportunity.
Thanks, Steve. Comments? Any other comments, questions? Oh, Michael.
Now with a more serious thing. To build, but in a different direction. I totally agree with what Steve was saying. In a slightly different direction. On the first day, we heard about job opportunities like right now. But particularly for people who are going to graduate in a couple of years or finishing a postdoc, you know, can you give some sense of what opportunities might be in the commissioning team, maybe even transitioning to operations coming up in the next couple of years?
So directly funded out of the project, unfortunately, given the budgets that we're dealing with, there are a few opportunities, but there are not a huge number. I think I have another 2 or 3 more potential hires. But that said, I mean, I think Steve's point is relevant. I mean, I'll go back to, in general, the first bullet, right? Can't pay you right now. But this is an opportunity of a lifetime. Where's Bob? I don't know if Bob wanted to say a word or two about the ramp up to operations. And you know, I know the staffing profile that we anticipate for operations exceeds what would naturally transfer from the project. So there are opportunities there.
So in operations generally, as we've said, we may target certain groups to contribute for in-kind. We're not, we don't foresee having extra resources to go out and buy added resources above our current plan, okay? And of course, for commissioning itself, we're not going to ever mix operations and commissioning. Commissioning is part of the project. Pre-operations is a different set of activities. But as Chuck was saying, there may be opportunities for people to get involved. We're mostly working right now on working with the project for how the project team, those that are going to transition in operations, how that works, how the activities from the project ramp out and the activities for operations ramp in. At the end of this whole period, there will be some roles, particularly in Chile, that we will likely fill from outside because there isn't a natural project person to take them. But these are mostly on the mountain type things, not scientist type things.
Thanks, Bob. Any other questions or comments? Are we doing on time, Rand Paul? Are we early? Well, maybe we'll have an extended coffee break. Thank you, everybody.
But